Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss PMQs as usual, as Rishi Sunak was tackled over his failure to deliver the houses he promised, the damage to the economy he's causing, as well as to people's living standards, of course, and all he could do in defence was say that it would somehow be worse under a competent Labour government. He actually got quite tetchy at the questions as well. Again, this has been a bit of a theme. I think he seems to be losing his poise and descending into Boris Johnson level umbrage and petulance at anyone telling him he isn't all that great after all. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So Keir Starmer decided to pick Rishi Sunak up over housing. It's a particular weakness for the Conservatives because it's widely accepted that we have not been building enough houses. The Conservatives cannot claim that we're building enough. The Conservatives promised house building targets in their manifesto, 300,000 a year, and then Rishi Sunak backed down from pressure within his own party when it came time to legislate for that. The issue of house building for the Tories is very much like the issue of net zero. See, publicly they support both aims because their voters do, but they do not actually implement any policies because of resistance within their party. When it's net zero, it's ideological on the part of many MPs. In the case of the house building target, it's NIMBYism. So although Tory voters know we need more houses and they want the more houses, they don't want them near them. In addition, Labour have been setting out their position on housing again today via Lisa Nandy this morning. So I suppose it shouldn't have come as a surprise to hear Starmer making it the basis of his questions today. And he began by poking at the contradiction within Sunak's government. Starmer noted that Conservatives are campaigning in Uxbridge, which is Boris Johnson's old constituency, up for a by-election very soon, so they're campaigning with an attack on housing targets of 300,000 new homes a year. But this is the Conservatives' manifesto promise, and it is still formally the Conservative government's policy. So they're campaigning against their own manifesto as well as official government policy. So Starmer asked Sunak if he was in favour or against the policy. Naturally, Sunak didn't answer the question, just saying that housing starts are double the number they were under Labour, and we have the highest number of first-time buyers in 20 years. Well, one at a time there. First of all, I don't know what statistical fiddle he's playing at by talking about housing starts, but housing completions are all that matters. You can't move into a house that started and takes 20 years to build. No, how many are completed? The Conservatives are by no stretch building double the number of homes that Labour did, before even getting into the nitty-gritty of comparing records on affordable housing. Like, in fact, as the Tories, I thought to myself, well, as the Tories have been in power for 13 years, and Labour were in power for 13 years, shall we compare? During Labour's time in office, there were 2.6 million new homes completed. During the same period of Conservative government, there's been about 2.2 million so far. So they're 400,000 behind in the same time period, and bear in mind that they were well behind before their recent push. There has been a recent push. If we'd compared the first decade for each, for example, would have been embarrassing. Or if we compare how many new homes are built in Labour council areas as opposed to Tory council areas. But the fact of the matter is that the Tories are behind. So untrue on any measure that's worth thinking about. Also, Sunak's point about the highest number of first-time buyers in 20 years. Okay, yeah, that's true. But all he's saying there is there's the highest number of first-time buyers now since Labour were in power. And it is well below their peak. So, and actually, if I was to adjust for the population per capita, it's well below Labour's peak. You know what I mean? So after Sunak refused to answer the question, Starmer said, well, hang on, this is not a difficult one to answer. And then he said, so can you name anyone who thinks the government will hit its target? Sunak just continued on with his line that they were building more homes. Now, I have to say, I did wonder if Starmer may not have been better focusing in on the schism over this policy within the party. Because from this point on, Rishi Sunak basically insisted they were building more homes, Labour were against building more homes, and he tried to attack Starmer's honesty or promise compliance, if you like. And this is going to be a thing, by the way, a new Rishi Sunak tactic, which I'm going to discuss in a separate video when I get time, because I think he might be making an interesting strategic choice there. But anyway, Starmer instead focused attention on the Conservatives saying they were in favour one minute and against the next. But not only isn't this actually the case, I think the truth is more damaging to the Tories, because the fact of the matter is it's not that they're changing their mind. It's that some are in favour of the policy, because they know homeowners are often a rich source of votes, because they want more homes, they want more homeowners, more votes. But there are also Tories who are against it because of like NIMBYism. And although Sunak points at some Labour MPs suggesting, well, they don't want developments in their areas. No, NIMBYism's everywhere. But Labour are nonetheless talking about a policy of enforcing targets, as well as other features, such as on building on disused industrial sites, similarly abandoned areas. So the houses will be built with Labour's policies, not so much with the Conservatives. And Starmer asked Sunak how he can claim to be the party of home ownership. Now, as Sunak predictably didn't answer, because I can't remember the last time he did answer a question, Starmer therefore took that and said, right, well, at least you're not claiming that the Tories are the party of home ownership because Labour are. And then Sunak ended up by saying the difference was that he delivers on his promises while Starmer does not. I mean, never mind the fact that the only promises Starmer could deliver on so far have been internal party ones because he's not been in government. And if you think about what he promised to do with the party, well, he's done it, hasn't he? But it's a bold strategy from Sunak to suggest that he's delivering on his promises when one promise was 300,000 new homes a year. Have you done it? No. Are you going to put it into the... You had some legislation ready to force it. Are you going to do that? No. All right, then. And he had 6 opportunities to stand by that promise, by the way. Just because it hasn't been met yet, he had six chances to say, but I still stand by that target and will meet it by the election. But he didn't, refused. Also, consider his cherry-picked 5 New Year promises. He came up with those. Those were his promises. They're not going at all well. And it's also worth mentioning, during the leadership contest, which installed Sunak as Prime Minister last autumn, he specifically said that all of the promises he'd made that summer would all be reviewed. In other words, null and void. So he actually had said, my own promises are worth nothing anyway. So either it's fine due to changing circumstances to change your policies, or it's not, one or the other. But then Stephen Flynn of the SNP also picked up on the theme of housing to begin with, but inevitably about the cost of living. And he started off with a dig at Sunak for telling people to hold their nerve. He asked when Sunak, close to a billionaire, ever struggled to pay a bill. And this is the thing, isn't it? I've said as much myself. Senior politicians are, of course, wealthy to an extent. They're not as wealthy as Sunak, of course, but you don't think of a Prime Minister being in financial difficulty when inflation rises or the economy stagnates. You know, their salaries many times more than the median average. And as Prime Minister with some measure of influence over the economic performance of the country, it is a stunningly bad look to tell people to hold their nerve when nerve has nothing to do with it. It doesn't matter how strong someone's nerves are. If they can't afford their mortgage over a long enough period, they lose their house. You don't just get to go into the bank and try and beat the bank manager in a staring contest, do you? Where's the nerve coming into it? Maybe Flynn could have pointed out that Sunak made his money, of course, as a banker by essentially gambling with other people's money. Quite easy to hold your nerve when, if you win your gamble, you make a load of money, and if you lose your gamble, the taxpayer bails you out to save their pension funds. Instead, after Sunak didn't bother to address his crass statement, Flynn noted that both the Conservatives and Labour are refusing to accept recommendations on public sector pay, which is true. From Labour's point of view, of course, they're not letting the Tories accuse them of unfunded tax and spend. But like I keep saying, I look back 25 years ago, before the 1997 election, it was the same thing. Labour were similarly stingy in their pay award promises, and people were similarly saying, oh, why don't Labour back this? So our pay's been suppressed for so long, why don't they back it? But once they were in power, I mean, I can tell you as a teacher, the salaries went up fairly rapidly, and I know others did too. It won't be as rapid next time because the economy is completely wrecked, and Brexit has very much superglued a spanner in the works, but we will get back to above inflation pay awards, just as we did before. Because whatever anyone thinks about different leadership, Labour leadership approaches, it's just a fundamental function of a Labour Party. But it's also no skin off Labour's nose. The SNP need to be pushing wedge issues against Labour in Scotland. This isn't one. Public sector pay awards are devolved in Scotland. So all Flynn was doing was having a pop at Labour's position on something that his own party in government will still control, no matter what happens in the Westminster elections. But it is an interesting one for the Tories because last year, I'll remind you, they said they couldn't award more money to NHS staff because they were respecting the pay award bodies. Oh no, we can't just, there's no point in having pay award bodies if we just ignore them, is there? Well, now they're saying they're going to ignore the pay award bodies. Oh no, we now need to ignore them because they're advising too much money, you see. All terrible for inflation. Well, I've said enough times, doesn't seem sensible to suggest that below inflation pay awards are inflationary, but well above inflation corporate profits and dividends are not. How does that work? Just if you understand anything about percentages, you know that doesn't work. But it's gone beyond just common numeracy. The IFS released an analysis which showed that inflationary issues right across Europe, actually, including the UK, of course, are driven actually by excessive profits, not pay. Funny that. And while we're on about economic literacy, I may as well just end with Labour's Chris Bryant, who noted that Sunak has been in charge of the economy for 1,321 days, delivered the largest national peacetime debt ever, the highest inflation since 1991, which was a Tory government, the fastest interest rate rises since 1989, same Tory government. Also, the Prime Minister, he said the Prime Minister was basically the worst person to be leading the country through this crisis that he created. And all Sunak could come up with was his usual, yeah, well, you'd be worse. Oh, really? I'm not sure people are buying that anymore. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.